Good evening, everybody. Welcome to round 8 and welcome to Mount Panorama in Bathurst, New South Wales. The one that everybody's been looking forward to because this is a very, very good copy of the track that these cars are racing on tonight. But the one thing that these cars have never ever seen before is conditions like they are tonight. It was meant to be the beginning of a triple header of night races to close out the month, but we find ourselves with a dusk race, just with the daylight condition or the nighttime conditions being a little bit too dark, and I think the sunset will give way to a very, very nice finish to a single 30 lap encounter tonight. Only the one race, not the two as we've been accustomed to for most of the season. Drivers are going to be in the saddle for about 70 to 75 minutes continuous, so an endurance test unlike any other. Welcome to those who are watching. My name is Stephen Deveries and Lewis Wedding is opposite me for this one. And Lewis, you've been out there cutting some laps and this is definitely going to be a very, very unique challenge ahead.
Yeah, so it is a very, as we all know, Bathurst large circuit, 6.2 kilometers long. But you've got really two distinct parts of the circuit. Obviously, you have the main straight or the pit straight, and then you've also got just preceding it, well before it, you've got Conrod, the chase. So braking performance is important, and then you've got to run down Mountain Straight towards turn two. So again, braking is still important, but then after that, you need traction. And you need confidence at the top of the mountain. So there are going to be some cars that are going to be quick at the top of the mountain, while they may suffer coming out of, say, Forest Elbow and some of the slower corners on the circuit, as well as being down on top speed. But we are going to have other cars that won't be as good at the top that will, absolutely blow the doors off the other cars. So I'm hearing like the VL Turbo is able to hit almost 280 kilometers an hour or mid 270s. My experience in the BMW, where I've been doing laps, is fastest I've got to is maybe 269, and that's with not the maxed out gear ratio. So that's with limiter bashing. So I think some cars may also be in the same boat where they have a choice between the longest gear ratio and a ratio where you can get to your top speed or a higher top speed, but you are going to be limiting limiter bashing as you come into the chase. So that's something drivers are going to have to sort out here tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned too about the differences in the cars and how a lot of them will take different parts of this circuit very differently. We expect cars like the Volvos to be very, very quick over the top of the mountain because they have been a very much an all-round type of car. And the ones such as the VL and VK Commodores, of course, there's only the VLs here tonight, two of them. They tend to be a bit of a bullet in a straight line, so they'll start to claw a bit of that time back. But they don't necessarily have the kind of ballerina type poise to get themselves going over the top of the mountain. They've got to just taper the expectations a little bit and pretty much just peg it out of out of the first corner and out of Forest Elbow, and that's where they're really going to wrestle back all of that time that they lose.
Yeah, so for those guys, so we've got Dane Liccardo, Nathan Higginson fairly close, fairly close to Terry Marwood and Shannon Wright, but I would say that those Volvos do have a pace advantage. I was overhearing them in Discord, and Shannon Wright and Marwood were setting their times with race fuel, so that's really, really impressive. They're in the low 19s with race fuel, while I think Dane and Nathan were both on lower fuel. So the start for those guys and the run into turn two in particular is going to be mightily important, because if they can steal the lead or perhaps even steal first and second, if they both get really good starts and qualify third and fourth, all they need to do is just not bin it at the top of the mountain. So all they got to do is just be close enough in qualifying, and come race time, they're going to have that top speed advantage, and then it's not about making a mistake.
No, spot on. Speaking of guys that are close to each other in the session, we'll have a look at the point standings. Let's have a look at how close some of these guys are together. And the answer is, well, a couple of them are pretty close to each other. Nathan Higginson lost his lead in the championship last time out, with a pair of victories going to Shannon Wright, and he's been the dominant force this year. He has racked up, he's had just about a podium at every race apart from one round where he didn't start, the first race, and all of Phillip Island he missed as well. He's not been lower than second every other race that he has competed in. So he has got 7 wins, 4 second places, a non-start, and a round where he unfortunately missed both rounds. So count the bad ones out, and you can see why he's at the pointy end of the standings. Higginson there in second. Liccardo, which you probably have seen on previous screens as Dane Joshua, he's actually changed and put his proper name in there, thank goodness. And he has vaulted up the order as a result of last round with Terry Marwood having a DNF in the second race. So that's why those positions swapped around. Jamie Nankervis was another driver that moved up the standings. He moved up, I think, 2 spots after last round. To be ahead of John Wright. And then Termo was another driver who was outside the top 10 and managed to vault himself in with a pretty handy showing at Queensland Raceway. 3rd in the second race, 6th in the first race. And Scott Nolan rounding out the top 10 at the minute. And a couple of drivers that are just on the fringe of the top 10 waiting to knock Scott Nolan off. Stephen Shadlow, only 5 points in arrears of Scott Nolan, so he's down on 168, not on the screen. People such as Brian Walsh, he's not far away either. He's only 20 points behind Scott Nolan as well. And as it stands at the moment, Brian Walsh in for tonight, and Stephen Shadlow, I think, is yet to make an appearance. So we could very well see a new face inside the top 10 at the end of tonight, Lewis.
Yeah, so Brian Walsh not too far away. He was asking what the minimum requirement of laps is. Obviously, it's going to be a long race for these guys. Obviously, just a single race tonight, but there is sort of the combined points of a normal roundup for this one because it is just a single special race. So if Brian can just get to that point with the number of cars out there, he should jump into the top 10. But of course, he has to contend with Brett Willis and Scott Murrell, who are right behind him, breathing down his neck as well. So, number of drivers looking to sneak into the top 10 this evening, and I don't think we got Brian Munn in the server either. So he's another one that could potentially drop out of the top 10 this evening.
Yeah, Brian Munn, I'm not 100% sure if he was going to make it or not. He's in the Discord channel, so maybe he's just a late arrival. He'll be in there, of course, for the driver's briefing at the moment. And a couple of new drivers that have been in the series in recent weeks in Kieran Sandhu, which I believe is actually meant to be Sandhurst, not Sandhu. It's just the way that it came up on our screen last week. And Rob Crusdale, or Ozrob, those guys have not made it tonight by the looks of things either. I think Kieran's actually been having some PC dramas. So 2 of the BMW 635s are vacant, and John Wright, the sole BMW in there at the moment, having changed from the VL Commodore last time out. And the circuit, well, we keep saying this is the one everybody wants to win regardless of what sim racing product you elect to use. And in this case, it is Assetto Corsa. The circuit itself needs no introduction. Everybody knows what it is. There are your sector markers, just up on the run up the hill for Sector 1, on the exit of Forest Elbow for Sector 2, and then the start-finish line controls Sector 3. The circuit itself, unmolested, pretty much since 1987, which was the last major change, which was the introduction of the chase as per the international requirements. Before that, the circuit just went straight on all the way to Murray's Corner, and we took out 3 turns. So instead of being 23 corners, there was 20. And this is interesting, I guess, to point out too, Lewis, because these cars would have seen both variants back in the day. They would have actually participated on the old layout and on the new layout.
Yeah, I gotta say, I would not have wanted to drive a car with poor brakes coming into Hill Corner before the chase was put in, and I think I've heard it a couple of times from numerous people, and I have to agree that it's one of the few times where a track has had to make a modification for either safety or, just to alter the size of the track, like if you're thinking about Hockenheim or something like Imola. But Bathurst, with the addition of the chase, it's actually made it a better racetrack, and it's now one of the most famous corners in well, not only just touring car racing, but also the world.
Yeah, spot on. A lot of people were, I guess, a bit sceptical about when that corner was going to be added back in the late 80s in time for 1987. And they all sort of worry about, what sort of impact it was going to have on the racing. But you're right, it's given us some fantastic moments, not just in recent times, but over the 30 odd years that it has existed since. There's always been something go on there, and it's just really added to the drama and the moniker that anything can happen when it comes to Bathurst. And quote Murray Walker, it usually does. That's the end argument, plain and simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it not only it has, and Frosty's been in that gravel trap a couple times. Unfortunately, you got I think Rick Kelly as well in '07 had some dramas in that car, and I think it was the Coke car as well, rolling as well. I mean, it's just an iconic corner, and in these cars, some of these cars with good brakes, so the BMW should be able to navigate it quite nicely. But there's some other cars like I know the VL struggles a little bit, and I was trying some other ones that aren't being raced tonight, but you had to brake very, very early and lift off, while some cars, you can brake at the 150 and pull it up no problem. So could see some differences into the chase, and some drivers struggling and some drivers able to make up a heap of lap time. So that's going to be something to look out for in the race and in qualifying.
Yep, well, qualifying, as you mentioned, right there, something to look out for, and that is right now. So first the flying laps getting underway with Shannon Wright, I guess we can call him the customary first man out. He always seems to be one of the first few drivers out on the circuit. The Volvo 240T common sight, and he has been in this car for, I can't remember actually, has he been in this car for the whole entire time of ACADS? I'm not 100% sure. Maybe there might have been a late change. If not, he has been in it all the time. My mind has to go all the way back to the very first round in Adelaide to find out. I'll have to go and check that up a bit later. There have been that many changes. I've been struggling to keep up with some of them, as everyone seems to usually jump in a new car just about every week. They're only allowed one change per season, so whatever they're with now, they've got to stick with. And this one, we often remark, seems to be the car that is the good all-rounder. And this is the part of the circuit where I think he'll be absolutely wringing the neck, because it is very light on its feet, dances like a ballerina through a lot of these corners, and is very, very good on the brakes when he needs it to be.
Yeah, it's a really good all-round car, that Volvo. So not only is it good through the corners, and I haven't driven it, but from what I can gather, it's also good under brakes. And when I have been around it doing laps today, it actually has quite good acceleration as well. So a really well-rounded car, and we can see that in the standings, and with all the drivers switching to it as the season's gone on. But I'm just trying to have a look at the moment, one of the earlier streams here on your broadcast, and I'll see if he was indeed in the Volvo or if he's been in something else.
Yeah, there's a few drivers that have changed recently. We said John Wright was the last driver to change cars for the last round, moving from the VL Holden over to the Volvo, the BMW 635. So that was the last change. Before that, it was Nathan Higginson moving up from the Mustang to the VL. That was another change. And Terry Marwood was another one that put his fortunes in the Volvo, having driven the VK for the opening one or two rounds. First time out, 219.1 for Shannon Wright. So you weren't joking, Lewis. These guys were running around on not only a full tank of fuel, but they were putting in some fantastic numbers. And now Marwood...
An 18.5.
An 18.5. That's a huge change. And then Higginson, the only other man under the 220 at the moment, as we wait for more times to come in.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see too many other drivers outside both the VL Commodores of Higginson and Liccardo, and Wright and Marwood go under that. I guess you could call it a magical 220 mark. Turmo's quite close on a 220.3, but the times I've seen in practice, no one else has been really quite close to getting under it. But now that the fuel's out of Marwood's Volvo, he's flying 18.5, very, very fast.
What's the strategy going to be here for this one, Lewis? Because it's such a long lap, not just the lap itself, but the out lap as well scrubs off 2.5 minutes by the time you trundle out of pit lane. You've only got 20 minutes to play with this session, so you do lose a little bit of time if you decide to come in and change tyres and go again. Do you think some drivers will maybe try and do like a 2 or 3 lap run, come in and reassess their options, and then maybe go out for another 2 or 3 lap dash to see what they can improve on?
Yeah, I'd say you'd probably want to go out and do maybe 2 time laps, have enough fuel for 3 time laps, and then escape back. But yeah, you'd probably want to have, as I said, enough for 3, and then do 2 hot ones, and see where you end up, and maybe you need to make a setup change, or maybe you had a little bit of traffic, so you'd then go again. Because yeah, you don't get too many laps out in this circuit, with the lap time being, optimally at 2 minute 18. But if you get balked, it's not going to be 2:18. You're going to be going a lot slower. So you are going to want to maximise the amount of laps you have, and 2 lap run, possibly 3, depending on what happens, and then back to the pits.
So out of the drivers that have set a lap time so far, we are only missing one, which is Jamie Nankervis, the only man yet to post a truly representative lap time. He must have had at least one bite at the cherry, and he is then it looks like he's aborted it, and his time at the moment of a 4:31. It'll be an out lap, and I think probably a mistake somewhere. At the moment, Brett Willis, the last man that has set a time, or latest man to set a time, he's gone back to the pits along with Higginson, so they're employing a little bit of a different strategy, maybe going for a single or 2-timed lap run, as you were calling it, and then coming in if they butcher their second attempt too much, and then reset and go again. There was an improvement there from Dane Liccardo jumping up ahead of Turmo. Murrell was very briefly ahead of Turmo as well, and Turmo going through just a few seconds ago has then returned the favour.
Well, Turmo has got underneath that magical 2:20 mark, and he's only 15 hundredths away from Dane Liccardo, and Higginson only half a tenth away. So nothing between those 3 guys at the moment.
Murrell, big moment for Murrell. Sorry, Lewis, big moment for Murrell on the exit of turn 2. Just took way too much curb, gave the fence a huge rub on the run out of Griffins.
He's only a couple tenths away himself of getting under that 2 minute 20 mark. So I've stuffed my call up already, but it's good to see that times are starting to tumble down. Did have a look at Shannon Wright just before, and obviously he hasn't put his lap together, even though he's still sitting in second place. And the second lap he did, he ended up fencing it. So just struggling a little bit at the moment, but we do know he's got pedigree, and come the second half of this qualifying session, I expect him to be right there with Marwood.
Yeah, agree. Those 2 guys have been the class of the field in the practice session that finished up about 10 or so minutes ago, just before the driver's briefing, as Murrell gives the wall another rub on the exit of the dipper. And around the final, the elbow. And now he can open up the taps. Likewise, Higginson behind him can open up the taps a little bit more as well. Oh, and he's not going to open. Oh, there we go. He's understeered completely off the circuit there and done a little bit of his lawn mowing for the weekend. And that'll ruin this lap. And he'll probably just pull out of it, I'd imagine. Look at Higginson. He's using all the grass on the approach to the chase before you even get the chance to put your wheels in that thing. And Murrell's off, and he's going to... Oh, is he going to avoid it? Yes, he does. He avoids Higginson.
Higginson's gone. But thankfully, the gravel traps in this version of the track do slow down quite a bit. We've had Turmo improve. He's gone third on a 19.4, so Turmo out there finding a bit of pace. Yep,
jumped 2 spots, so that's a very nice improvement from him. Now, did Murrell continue, or did he go back to the pits? No, it looks like he's gone... no, he's going again. He continued on after all of that. Managed to get the garbage off his tyres quickly, but he's putting more garbage on by just kicking his tyres out into the outside of turn 1.
Will cost him just a little bit of time as well when you do run a little bit wide on the grass. So it does slow down just a smidge, and it will cost you maybe half a tenth all the way down this straight into turn 2. But very, very committed. You need to turn in a little bit early. Once you get into that inside groove, your car has a turbo. You've got to be flat as soon as you know you're going to make that corner and sort of run it wide.
Murrell's got fistfuls of opposite lock-on approach to the cutting as well.
Got it on the way out as well. So he's fighting that car and he's giving it everything.
Yeah, we're on board looking over his left shoulder at the minute. He's going to fence it. He hits the fence at Sulman Park and then the outside fence again.
Hit.
And that's a huge hit. So he's, that's him done and dusted for that lap. And he's probably got to fuel himself for maybe another 2 or 3 lap run and get out quickly. And these two cars, Higginson and Liccardo, have gone past Murrell's scene of the accident. Oh, there's going to be I was about to say it was about to be a huge one. And Liccardo nearly ran into the squirming car of Higginson. That was extremely tight.
Funnily enough, Liccardo had made that exact same error about a minute and a half ago, and that's why he went back to the pits. He ran wide at McPhillamy, over the curb, lost the rear. He's got back onto the track with, I'm guessing, a full amount of throttle and in the fence on the opposite side. But Higginson's going to continue on. In fact, he's going to do a little bit of slipstreaming, and I wonder how these guys are going to go on this next run. But if I was Murrell, I'd only put maybe two, enough fuel for 2 time laps, and then come back in and set yourself up.
Oh, Higginson's deep. He's deep, and he's gone.
I wonder if I've heard that before.
Yeah, I think we wonder where we've heard that before, but that was now he's sideways.
Yeah, he's way off.
Yeah, he locked a front brake on his approach to the chase, and he just went sailing past the number 35 of Liccardo, and there was no stopping that one.
Yeah, so his rear tyres now, it would be very, very unkind to him. In fact, he's just left the pits right behind Liccardo. So hopefully he doesn't get in his way here, just lets him go. Because Liccardo is on a flyer, while Higginson's only just left the pits. But it looks like they're going to battle down here.
What on earth are these two doing? I know they're sharing a setup, and that's it's admirable that they are trying to improve themselves.
And they both stuffed themselves up, and I wouldn't be too pleased if I was Dane with that, because I'm trying to set a heater and get myself not only in front of Higginson, but
they're both fencing it. Liccardo's now fenced it, so he's done and dusted, and it looks like Brian Munn may just get a lap or 2 in. He has made it, which is great to see. And I'm just looking to see whether or not I think we may have lost one of our drivers in the last little bit. I'm just trying to work out who it was, because there was one driver yet to set a lap time, and we've now only got 11 drivers, whereas Brian Munn's just arrived, which means we would have had 12. So I'm just trying to work out very quickly who the driver is that we've just lost.
Ross,
it's Brendan Ross. Yeah, there you go. You're right. I well picked up. And Brendan Ross is not in the Discord again, so maybe he might have had a bit of an issue. Terry Marwood, this lap, does he improve, or is this an out lap for him? Looks like it's an out lap. And 5.5 minutes remaining. Terry hasn't improved on his time at all since he set that very, very impressive 2:18.5 very early in the session. Shannon Wright really hasn't been able to find an answer for it just yet. The drivers behind that have Termo, who's moved up into P3. So it's a Volvo 240T in positions 1, 2 and 3 at the moment. I thought we'd be predicting that at the beginning of tonight's proceedings. A pair of VL Commodores in 4th and 5th, very close together. Oh, and Terry's had a bit of a moment. And then Scott Murrell, sort of all on his own, in a bit of no man's land. 6 tenths in arrears of Liccardo. Jamie Nankervis, his best lap probably came around 5 or so minutes ago, I think. And then Brett Willis and Brian Walsh were pretty close together for a little bit, but Brett's just managed to pull away. And I think Brian actually has managed to pull away from John Wright as well. So for the moment, that's the positions as they stand. And we are still obviously awaiting a lap time from Brian Munn. Just looking to see if we can pick up where Brian is. Here he is, going up Mountain Straight for the first time. So
had Shannon Wright improve. He's within 2/10 now, but still got to find a little bit of extra time.
He's now under the under the 2-minute 19 barrier. So an 18:7.82 is his latest attempt. And yeah, just fractionally over 0.2 of a second away from his teammate. Another improvement for Turmo, 19 flat.
And so these Volvos proving to be quite quick around this track. Seem to be the great all-rounder. Got a bit of top speed, acceleration, and quick over the top.
What I think they're probably doing though, too, Lewis, is they're trying to maximise their amount of straight line speed. Or Turmo's given up the ghost here. They're trying to maximise their amount of straight line speed, or how quickly they can get to their top speed relatively early, even though they're sort of capped out at a lot less than what the Commodores are managing to do. So they're trying to maximise their exit out of Forest Elbow, and it's one of the very rare mistakes I think we've seen from Shannon Wright, fencing it on the run through the S's. But yeah, they're having to find a way to get to their top speed a lot faster, so maximising their exit out of turn 1, maximising their exit out of Forest Elbow, so they can get to those higher speeds as early as they can, because they do have such a deficit that they're giving away to these Commodores. Yeah,
I do wonder. I'll have to ride on board with Marwood towards the back end of this lap, just to listen to the engine, because if they're hitting the rev limiter, it might be another thing that they're doing is they're not using all the gear ratios, so there would be maybe that extra one, and it would be a little bit of a playoff. They might not have the ultimate top speed, but they might only, if they use the longer gear ratio, only reach that top speed 10 meters before you brake. So it's essentially useless. But if you can get to that speed 300, 400 meters earlier and be within 2 or 3 Ks of it, you're going to make up time under acceleration. So that could be another thing that they're doing. So I'm going to ride on board now.
And we're on board as well. So he's in 6th gear. He's just gone up to 6th gear now as he came over the hump. No, it didn't sound like they're on the rev limiter at all.
And got Liccardo. He's into the 18s as well, so he's put together a bit of a scorcher, and he's only 2/10 away and only 5 thousandths away from Shannon Wright.
Very nice job. Very late in the piece as well, and this will be his last attempt. Now, he's got clear racetrack, so he's not got any distractions from Nathan Higginson this time around to worry about. And he's just got to keep his eyes forward and get on with the job here.
And got a number of drivers in the pits, so thankfully Brendan Ross is back in the pits, but Willis, Walsh, Wright and Turmo, who's just been...
Oh, and Liccardo's gone. Liccardo's gone at turn 2. And
Higginson coming just around the corner, number of cars coming.
And Murrell was unlucky, the unlucky third man out of the row. I don't think Liccardo could exit to the pits quickly enough to get anything going. Now, he's just gone out again, I've noticed as well, Liccardo, but he's not going to get another lap.
Yeah, he's not going to get another lap, and Higginson was then also balked by Brian Munn there.
Right, Shannon Wright just letting Terry go here as well. I think, the other way around, sorry. Nankervis, that's Nankervis letting Shannon Wright go through. So Shannon Wright gets another lap. Nankervis does not, because he's butchered the last corner. So Marwood and Wright, the only 2 men left on the circuit that are going to get another lap. Good to see Brendan Ross has made it back in. His time has obviously stood for a little while now. And look at the margin. It wasn't much between Ross and Nankervis out of all of that.
Do got to remember as well that he's in a Group C car, not in a Group A car.
That's right.
So not a bad effort from Brendan Ross.
Terry, maximum attack down through the S's, and he's made a little bit of a meal of that. Trail braked it through the last part of it. Car got away from him, and that will cost him some time, so this is not going to be an improvement on this lap. The one thing he does have to worry about, though, is whether or not his teammate behind him is going to improve on the 0.2 of a second deficit that he has at the moment. I'll tell you what, though, Shannon Wright probably would have had a bit of a scare when he saw Liccardo's time come up behind him going, oh my goodness gracious me, how on earth are these VLs that we've been so much quicker than all season long so far all of a sudden found a bit of pace?
and it'll worry him because we all know it's faster down the straights. As Shannon Wright was on a really good lap up until that moment coming down the SSR, just lost the rear just a little bit. He's going to continue on though, but it will worry him just a little bit because if Liccardo can get a nice start, just as we saw the VLs do last time out at Queensland Raceway, they can be difficult to pass, being faster down the straights. But out of Forest Elbow now for Shannon Wright. It's been a clean lap. I've been on board since turn 2, and outside that little lockup that with the rears there coming down the mountain, it's actually been quite clean and crisp. So he'll be hoping he can put together this final sector and see if he can find 2/10. But he's all over the place into the chase. He's able to just pull it up, but he will lose time. And that'll be the end of that. I wonder if he'll just practice a pit entry here.
Maybe, right. And
no, he's going to continue on just to say he had a crack.
Well, let's just see what lap time he does. Terry's last lap time was a 19.8 before that, and Shannon Wright's is a 19.3. So I guess that's why he wanted to press on. He probably just wanted to see how...
that would have been a quick lap. That would have been right. If he didn't make that mistake into the chase, that cost him at least 3 to 4 tenths, I'd say. Because it cost him, obviously, running wide, he would have scrubbed off too much speed at that point of the chase anyway, but he also would have lost momentum going into the final corner. And it's the same when he comes down the mountain. He would have lost another 2 or so tenths. There's easy a low 18 in that for Shannon if he had have got it right. But he didn't, and Terry Harwood will start on pole.
And the dog next door to you, I guess, agrees with that one, because I think that's Terry's first pole since Adelaide, actually. He did start on the front row for the very first race of the season, which he went on to win. And that's the only victory, that's the second victory that he has all season long. The other one that he won was the very first race at the Bend in, what was that, round number 6. That was race 1 of 2. Terry's got a pretty handy record at the moment of all the podiums that he's racked up. He's racked up what is it here? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 podiums all up. So he's got 3 thirds, 3 seconds, and the 2 firsts. And he's not too shabby behind the wheel. So this pole position start for him, I think he'll be very much looking forward to, Lewis.
Yeah, ideal starting position, obviously. Now, I do wonder if it is a staggered grid or if it's going to be a flat start like they do in the supercars and in real life at this circuit. And if so, he'll be desperately hoping that he's on the inside because for those that haven't driven this version of the circuit before, it is from the Assetto Corsa Competizione, and there is crowns in the road and different lines that you really have to take. And turn 1, there's one of them where there's a little bit of camber on the inside. If you miss that line, not only does it compromise you all the way down the straight, but you can't get the nose in. So he will definitely be hoping he's on the inside, and he'll be hoping he can get a nice start and hopefully fend off some fast cars down the straight. But he'll be very happy with that lap and starting from pole position, no doubt.
Yeah, I have a bit of a look down this order, and of course it's the customary, I guess, front row at the moment, the pair of Volvos off the front, and following that, Dane Liccardo's VL and then Termo in there as well. So that was a good result from Termo as well, following on his good results from the 3rd place at the last race that he attended, which was last week at Queensland Raceway. He'd been a little bit under the weather as well. He wasn't too well on that particular night, so that makes that effort all the more I guess, pleasurable for him in terms of how much better he would have been feeling after that one. But then to back it up with a performance like that tonight, top-notch effort from him, being as high up the grid as he has.
Yeah, he'll certainly be quite pleased with his efforts. That said, though, qualifying's one thing. A 30-lap race is a long race at Bathurst. We were sort of talking beforehand that this race is going to be almost an hour and a half, hour 15 long. So he'll be happy with qualifying, but now it's all about putting in 30 nice, consistent laps, not overcommitting where you shouldn't, not over driving the car, and not putting any dents in it, because it is quite easy to do around here. But hopefully the confidence he'll get from this, from his qualifying effort, will translate into a nice clean run here around Bathurst.
Who else do you think is a good threat for maybe a podium tonight, Lewis? I mean, we've talked about the obvious choices being Terry and Shannon, form drivers most of this season. Dane Liccardo's had a pretty decent run of podiums. He had 5 in a row up until the second race of the Bend, but his results over the last 6 or so rounds have been pretty good. And there's a few other people with podiums dotted amongst here, there, and everywhere, but I keep thinking back to drivers that just maybe need to be a little bit more consistent with some of their driving tonight if they want to have a real chance at probably, I would say, third place on the podium, barring anything going wrong for the top two.
Yeah, so as we've seen, Marwood and Wright have been not only blindingly fast, but they've been, mega consistent. They don't really put a foot wrong all that often. So let's say we lock those two out and it's just for third. I mean, you do have Liccardo, who, he's put together a mega lap in qualifying. But as we've seen, I mean, he's really up and down in race trim. And I don't know if it's both Liccardo and Higginson and Munn, but, if it's just their driving style. But whenever we see them half the time, they're sideways. So I don't know if that's a car thing or a driver thing, but around here, you don't really want to get sideways too often with walls so close. But both those VLs of Liccardo and Higginson are a chance, but we both know, as we've watched and we've even raced against Turmo in other series, and driving a Volvo as well, which seems to be the form car in the series, I think he's probably going to be the main threat for that third place. He doesn't usually make too many mistakes. Unfortunately for him, he's normally the one that's on the receiving end of a driver making a mistake and getting knocked off the road. But when he has, when he's not getting knocked off the road by other people, generally he doesn't make too many mistakes. And unfortunately, I don't want to knock him, but Higginson and Liccardo, at least in these cars, they do seem to overdrive him a little bit, and it will hurt them. So they're going to have to drive it nice and straight, and I give Turmo probably the best opportunity. But if you want a smoky, Scott Murrell, he hasn't been too happy with the Nissan in practice from what I've heard in Discord, but you can't really count him out. He's not too far away either. If he can just put a nice race together, not make any mistakes, he's also a threat for third place.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that one. He might be a bit of a dark horse if he can keep it on the road over the next 30 laps. And this is a bit of a unique challenge for these guys. 30 laps is a long way to go for a single race. So it's going to be at a bit of a premium for just minimising those mistakes. We keep saying that at short tracks you don't have a lot of wiggle room when you make a mistake to gain that time back, because you're literally gaining and losing time in micro tenths of a second. Here the mistakes are magnified to a huge degree if you make them. Lights are on. Let's see how Bathurst goes for the ATCC crew. And you were talking about the start, and there's Marwood has been putted at the start. But you talked about Dane Liccardo and the Commodore getting a really good start, and he's done precisely that. Murrell's gone off at the first corner. It's all happening.
Yeah, so I didn't quite see what happened there, but obviously Marwood, a shocking start, and there was contact with a car from behind, so that may have been... No, it's not Higginson, because he's in third place, but Liccardo into the lead ahead of Wright. They've got a little bit of a gap now over Higginson, but Willis has been he's had a fantastic start. He's up to P4 already.
Liccardo's given it away at turn 2, though, to let Shannon Wright off the hook. Shannon Wright's gone through at the Griffin's Bend corner and now up through the cutting. Oh, Liccardo's fenced it. He's given the wall a rub. And has he lost another position? No, he's under siege, though, from Higginson.
Yeah, so not ideal there. All he had to do at the top of the mountain is just not fence it, and it would be difficult for Wright to get by. But now it's all about refocusing. He's got Higginson all over the back of him. He's just got to focus on hitting his lines here, not overdriving the car, and just be within striking distance coming out of Forest Elder, because as we know, that VL is faster than the Volvo. But Turmo's been one that's fallen back off the start. Also having a look at Brian Walsh, he's up a couple spots, and Munn as well up into eighth place. But Murrell 2-1 there at Skyline, so he's made up a couple spots. But yeah, disaster for Marwood. And I think Brendan Ross, he's just left the pits now, but he's got a bit of work to do.
Yeah, so Brennan Ross looks like he had to start from pit lane, so he's well behind the field. Going to need I'm not sure if the safety car is actually activated for this or not. I think someone actually has to drive it, if memory serves me correctly. So he's going to need a lot of help to catch up to this field. But now, look at this, side by side, Brian Walsh and Brian Munn, the XD and the VL, and Munn's got the ascendancy, but he's got wheels in the grass!
I thought he was going to end up spearing into the side of Walsh there, but they're going to go side by side again. And Murrell's off the road. He's out, broke himself just in front.
And Ryan Walsh is doing his best two-wheel impression through the chase, getting way too much curb at the left-hander.
Oh, we've just further ahead got Higginson. He's all over the place as well out of the final corner. So very, very busy start to this one.
Extremely busy start. Who would have thought, though, that Terry Marwood would have penciled himself in for a good result, and he's all the way down 11th. We still don't know who was the person that got into the back of him, because Liccardo had a very, very good start and pretty much dived down the inside of the two Volvos at the front, so he was well clear. Who was the man in 5th place? That was the person that I was sort of worried about. Maybe that's the person that's gotten into the back of Terry, maybe trying to go the opposite way.
Well, I do wonder if it was maybe Ross, because he wasn't, he was in that sort of midfield range. I wonder if he just got blindsided and ran into the back and then went back into the pits and started from the pit lane. I do wonder if that was the case, but that's something we'll have to find out post-race. Marwood still got, a lot of time to come back, and I'm just having a look at the timing. It says final lap there, so I don't know what is going on with that, but we have had Liccardo actually just close in on Shannon Wright here on this lap here, and you won't want to, well, Shannon Wright won't want him to get too much closer, because Liccardo is within striking distance here. Yeah,
I reckon Shannon made a mistake over the top of the mountain, because that gap has eroded quickly. Like, it's down to, what was it now, about 6 to 7 tenths of a second. It's really, really close, and this is where we've spoken about already, the VL Commodore's straight line speed is at its best. We go on board with the roof cam. It's actually just sort of gaining a little bit now late in the zone, so he didn't get the run out of the elbow that he wanted, and he's not able to have a chance.
A little bit of a slide though for Wright under braking, while Liccardo was actually quite smooth there, so not close enough for Murray's or maybe even turn 1, but if Liccardo plays his cards right, he could make a shot at turn 2 if he can get a good couple runs here out of Murray's and out of Hell Corner.
I had a look at the amount of curb that Shannon Wright used at the chase as well. He used a fair bit, and Liccardo used none. So I think Dane's just decided, you know what, I need to start just driving the car nice and straight, nice and smooth. Just don't do anything silly. See, he didn't even use all the rumble strip on the outside of turn 1 either.
He's closing in, and yeah, he's not over driving that car. It's the best we've seen him drive. I know it's only lap 3. But,
here he goes.
A little bit of lap here, side by side, and if he pulls it up, he's in the lead.
Shannon's going to fight it though. He left him a space, then firmly shuts the door at turn 2.
Yeah, I think Liccardo there realised his car isn't quite as good under brakes, and he'll bide his time. So smart driving. Now it's all about just sticking with it, and with the top speed advantage he should have, he should be able to get him into the chase. And if he does that, again, it's all about not making a mistake, and it'll make life very difficult for Shannon Wright.
Coming back to your comment about playing his cards right, if this is probably a perfect test for young Dane Liccardo. He's only a teenager. I think he's about 15 or 16. Very, very quick. Has a lot of pace, but often gets a little bit flustered at times when he overdrives a car or makes a silly mistake. He's very, self-conscious and of his own performances, and sort of smacks his own self around the ears when he makes silly mistakes. But this is the perfect chance to play your cards right. If you want, just sit back behind Shannon Wright. You've got nothing to worry about over the course of the next, say, 10 or 12 laps even, getting to half distance. Then you can start thinking about what you want to do pit stop wise. Maybe then have a look at getting a decent in lap, decent out lap. There's strategy options available here for him. All he's got to do is just sit behind, take his time, manage the car, and not make any silly mistakes. This is a perfect breeding ground for consistent driving, and he'll be rewarded if he does that.
Yeah, and even like he'll want to get the win, of course, but if he just plays his cards right, he can claim a comfortable second place. These two are driving away from Higginson and Turmo, who are now locked in a battle. They've got Murrell not too far away, and Terry Marwood's 25 seconds away. These guys are faster than Marwood as he's trying to fight his way through the field. As we see Liccardo have a look at the
Higginson's off at the final corner, and that's easy pickings for Turmo. So the Terminator goes through and is now back on the podium at the moment. And Scotty Murrell's just started to range into view of these guys as well, and we talked about him being a bit of a smoky for a podium. He's recovered pretty well after going off the road at turn 1 on lap 1.
Yeah, he's done a really good job of fighting his way through the field. He's been consistent these last couple laps. On that last lap, setting a personal best of a 2:22.3. But just as a comparison to the front two, they were both a 2-minute 20.1 for Shannon Wright and a 19.9 for Liccardo. So both those guys comfortably, 2 to 3 seconds faster than these guys. Marwood, who you could argue is the third fastest driver on the circuit, I mean, his last lap was a 2:22.2. So, going back to Liccardo, all he has to do here is just not make a major error, and he has at least second place in the bag.
Yeah, spot on. And at the moment, the gap is a second, and I actually think for Liccardo, that is probably a very comfortable margin to just be sitting behind Shannon Wright. About a 1 second gap means that you don't have to push hard. You're still going to get a little bit of a tow from a little bit of slipstream behind, but you've then got that buffer room if anything wrong happens, like what Shannon Wright's just done now. He's just had a little bit of a moment on the exit of the elbow, and that 1 second gap means that if anything went wrong, Dane's got some bailout room to worry about. But this time he thinks about having a look at. He's going to have a look at the inside at the chase coming up as they get ready for this very, very fast right-hand corner, and Shannon gives it away to him, and now Dane's just got to sort of get it stopped, get the block pass on, and that's really well done.
Yeah, he's done that really beautifully. I don't think it was really intentional. It's just so much that VL has to brake a lot earlier than the Volvo, but he's done that beautifully. And just going by the body language of both these drivers and both their cars, Liccardo has been the better driver. Obviously, he does have the faster lap, but Shannon Wright, he's been, uncharacteristic for him. He's been a bit sideways and hasn't looked entirely comfortable with the car. So if Liccardo can keep driving as smooth as he is here, who knows what he could do? I mean, he could win this race. Ooh. He's certainly given himself a great opportunity.
First pit stop, sorry Lewis to cut you off, first pit stop, which is for Nathan Higginson. He had a moment, Murrell went past him, I think he had a bit of a moment, and he came into the pits in a great hurry, kicking up dust and grass as he went. So that's a very early stop. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him have to stop twice if tyres start to give up on him. He'll have to probably run the harder compound for sure to have any chance of making it home now.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how the tyres last in the VL compared to the BMW, which I've been doing laps in. The BMW is quite good on its tyres outside the soft, unless which can overdrive quite easy. But with the way that we've seen Higginson drive, and even in this race, he would seem to chew up quite a bit of his rear tyres, but he's still in the box here, so I do wonder if he's got some other issue, and that's why he's put into the pits, because he's been stationary for longer than what it would take to fill the tank and change tyres.
And Brendan Ross has come in as well. I mean, he was at the back of the field anyway, so he sort of not going to lose any positions to anybody, but he might run the risk of going a lap down here very early in the piece. He was a minute 37 off the race lead, and with the race leader at the moment, I would imagine is probably coming down Conrod straight. Yes, he is. And Rossi's still in the pits. He's going to possibly go a lap down. Now, Higginson is still in the pits, and
so is Rossi. I think maybe they're having some issues down there. Higginson's only just got going now.
Wow.
So maybe there's been
something outside of the game that he's had to deal with, or perhaps he's just had a heap of damage. I don't know. We didn't see. But I'd have to guess there has to be something outside the game that's caused that.
Yeah, so he's very lucky not to go a lap down. You can hear Brendan Ross is still in the pits, and either that or maybe it's just the length of time that pit stops are taking. Maybe it's just something a little bit different that we're not sort of accustomed to. But Rossi should have probably been out by now at least, and Higginson should have been out miles ago. Where is Nathan Higginson compared to everybody else? He's on his way up to the cutting. So
he's on the other side of the circuit compared to even John Wright. So John Wright's going down Conrod. Higginson's only at the cutting or coming out of the cutting now. That's how much time he's down.
I'm more worried about the time that Higginson's got in hand over the race leaders at the minute. He's only got about 700 metres or so of racetrack. He hasn't got a hell of a lot of wiggle room to play with here.
Yeah, it's only got probably about 14 to 15 seconds to play with. That said, there is a compulsory pit stop that he now has gotten out of the way, but you certainly don't really want to go a lap down. But speaking of the leaders, Shannon Wright now just starting to apply the pressure to the back of Liccardo, and again, this is going to be another test for him. And again, it's all going to come down to not making a mistake across the top, and it's going to be very difficult for Shannon Wright to get him.
He's gone defensive, and now Wright's going to try and go the long way. Is he trying to worry him out of it? Oh, that's tight. That's like a tiger tight. That is extremely late for Wright, and he's just a little bit wide and a little bit wild, and that's going to give him absolutely no chance now of catching Liccardo down here. Although Liccardo very wide through the kink on the run to the elbow, and that's one thing that the Volvo's good at, Lewis, is it's able to pull up quite nicely for Forrest Elbow because Shannon Wright is able to get the nose in and turn right and then stay in the correct position he needs to be in for the left-hander, whereas Dane just took quite a lot of pace, floated it right out to the left-hand side, and then had to make a very narrow approach to the elbow.
And that's been a line that Dane's been taking all race long, so I'm guessing it's just the line that he takes, but he may need to just tweak it a little bit and just try and get a little bit more to the right-hand side just after that kink, and just set up his line better through Forrest's elbow and the preceding straight. Because if he straightened that up, there's absolutely no chance Shannon Wright would get him barring a mistake. But still, he's in the lead. He's doing a good job. But Jesus Christ, there was a hair between Wright, Liccardo, and a massive accident there. Thankfully, they got through it and got some good racing ahead, no doubt.
Yeah. Shannon Wright probably could have read the paint code that would have been on the rear bumper, or that would have been used to paint the rear bumper of that number 35 as they came down the S's. There was absolutely nothing in it. Now, Brendan Ross is still in the pits. I'm wondering whether he's actually got a technical gremlin of some nature. He did say that his PC had crashed when he was in qualifying, so maybe having a few more dramas than we first thought, and that's why he is still stationary at the minute. The Brian Walsh-Brian Munn battle had sort of resolved itself in the favour of Brian Walsh for the moment. That margin has ballooned out somewhat, and Brett Willis had nabbed the pair of them, and he's now in 7th place. There he is, just going up to Griffins. Now, what's Brett's lap times compared to everybody around him? He did a PB last time around, a 2:25.6, but he's still a little bit slower than Jamie Nankervis ahead to the tune of a half second, so not really gaining very much there. But the one person that is starting to find a little bit of time is Terry Marwood, which is on screen right now, the number 10. And at one stage he was 25 seconds in arrears of the race lead, but with Liccardo being out front now, that margin has come down to 23, and still plenty of time to go in this race.
Yeah, he'll be hoping that Shannon Wright can do him a solid. Just start battling him, Liccardo, just a little bit more. But you're right, he has started to pick up the pace, and you can see Scott Murrell. He's only just down the road now. Murrell is last lap at 22.1.8 compared to a 20.4. But just going back to Willis and Nankervis, those guys probably going to be locked in a battle between themselves in this race, just looking at the lap times, because they're faster than Brian Walsh, Munn and right behind, but they're also a little bit slower than Murrell and Marwood ahead of them. So those guys, that's going to be a battle to look out for, as well as Marwood trying to close down the gap between himself and Murrell. And Turmo's another one that's also just starting to find a bit of lap time, although his last lap time
21.5, yeah.
He'd be hoping for a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, Higginson's come into the pits again as we corrected him up to stop again. Marwood at 220.1, so that's consecutive improvements on PB for Marwood. Little lock up going into turn 1, and relative to everybody else ahead, he was faster than every single car ahead of him on the last lap. He was faster than Liccardo by a half second, faster than Shannon Wright by 0.6 of a second, faster than Turmo by nearly 1.5 seconds, and he was faster than Murrell by 2.3.
Yeah, so as you can see, that gap is essentially nothing. 2.2 seconds, but with the way he's driving, I'd probably put money down that he's going to be right behind Murrell by the time they get to Forest Elbow on this lap. So he's driving quite nicely at the moment. Problem is though, he's 23 seconds off the lead, so he's going to need Chernwright to help him out quite a bit.
Oh, Murrell loose. Sorry, Lewis. Murrell loose at Sulman Park and Reed Park. He had a huge moment, dropped his outside tyres in the grass, and I think that Murrell made a mistake on the previous lap as well, and that's what's put him on his tail. Oh, he's loose.
Again.
Yeah, big time loose coming through Skyline. And look, they're both offline through the S's and the Dipper, and Murrell just realises time to give it up. And that's actually a pretty easy pass for Terry in the end.
Yeah, so Murrell in the end making it easy for him. Murrell may have cost him just a little bit of time there, at least compared to the leaders. Looks like he's lost 3 to 4 tenths with all that going on, but no damage to Murrell's car. Murrell might have a scratch or two there from his excursion at the top of the mountain there, but now Murrell just needs to be quick and consistent. Maybe even think about an early stop and getting out in clear air with some fresh tyres and try and undercut Turmo, or he could even go long and pit for a shorter amount of time with the fuel fill, which, if it's anything like the BMW, only adding about half a lap or a lap, so won't be too much there.
Well, that is an interesting theory to talk about. Fuel and the amount of fuel that drivers would have put on to begin with. Now, of course, the compulsory pit stop requires drivers to come in and change tyres. In the shorter sprint races, fuel is really not a concern in that regard. But given that it's such a long lap and, you know, tyres will need to be changed, but also you can get a benefit on a circuit like this by playing with your fuel strategy a little bit. And with drivers being in the pits for such a long period of time from what we've been seeing, do you think some of these drivers may have taken on a little bit less fuel?
That may be the case, but I was also I went back to the menu to have a look at some of the tyres that drivers were running, and what was curious is both the Marwood and Wright cars are on the softer tyre, so they're quite confident that the Volvo doesn't quite overheat its tyres as much as the other guys out there, or they're just confident that they can make it work and work through the overheating that may happen. It's got Wright all over the back of the car at the top.
Yep.
While Turmo is on the medium tyre on the Volvo, and he's also doing fairly comparable lap times to Terry Marwood, albeit maybe a couple tenths slower. So that may be something we may need to look out for in the next 5 or 6 laps, is will the softer tyre start to fall away performance-wise, or will it hold up?
Well, speaking of holding up, I think that Dane Liccardo might be holding up Shannon Wright just a little bit here. There was round 2 at the top of the mountain with nothing between them again. And that line for Liccardo, I think, as you said, Lewis, maybe it's working for him a little bit, but he might need to alter it. What it did for him at the elbow that time around was it just took away Shannon Wright's speed that he'd carried through the elbow, forced him to check up, and then Dane could beat him back to the accelerator pedal and then get a little bit of a gap established down Conrod Straight. So whatever he's doing, it's working well for him if he can keep it up. But a bit later on in the race, Shannon might be aware of that sort of little bit of game, and he'll just maybe outplay him and maybe find a way to outdrag him down Conrod, given that he knows what game's being played already.
Well, we have seen Shannon just have a look a few times at the top of the mountain, and that might be his best bet, is to see Liccardo run a little bit wide, but it won't matter because he should be able to get just that little bit of extra drive with that power that he has in the VL. But
Yeah, I think that line is a Forest Elbow. If Shannon Wright's too close, he's going to get balked a little bit. So it might be smarter coming into that part of the track for Shannon Wright just to maybe hang back a little bit, carry the momentum and not get slowed down, and he'll be close enough to maybe have a look into the chase. But outside of that, if Liccardo doesn't make a mistake, the only place Wright's going to get it, I reckon, is by forcing a move here at the top of the mountain.
Oh, and he's made a bit of a meal. Oh, it looked like look, you see it in the rearview mirror. As we're looking over Dane Liccardo's left shoulder, you can see that Shannon Wright had a bit of a moment, and he's pushing the issue now. Is Shannon Wright? He's all over the back of Liccardo again. Round 3, gloves off between these two. Ding, ding, ding goes the bell, and this is where the Volvo, we've said all night, is strong. It can really dance through these corners a lot better, but Dane's doing all the right things at the minute, putting the car in all the right places. The gap between them has been no greater than 1.4 seconds for the entire first third of this race, which will come to its conclusion.
Wright's had a good run. He might think of a run here, but Liccardo...
Got to go the wrong way. Got to go the long way.
His natural line is to the inside there, and the switchback isn't really going to work. It's too long of a corner to really think about it. Liccardo also is able to get on the power at around about the same time, and now he's able to drive away. So Liccardo doing all he can at the top, doing all the things a smart driver should, and making it impossible for Wright at the moment. But they're getting closer and closer, Stephen. Hopefully there's no contact, but Shannon Wright just seems to be getting a little bit more impatient here.
Yeah, and this is where I think Shannon Wright needs to think about the strategy card a little bit here and work out, what's Dane going to do? Is he going to come in at the half distance marker? Maybe can I beat him out by pumping in a really good in lap and then a really good out lap to follow, and then put the pressure back on the other foot? The drama here for Shannon Wright, sorry, not for Shannon Wright, the drama here for Dane Liccardo is that strategy is really in Shannon's court here. He can dictate what he wants to do. If he comes in, then Liccardo's got to respond, and pretty much respond immediately, and that might be enough to force a mistake. Whereas if Dane comes in, he knows that Shannon's got pace, and maybe he can punch out a really good number, and then an overcut could potentially be on as well. So Dane's sort of a little bit caught here at the moment. He's got to have enough margin to make a stop and then really force Shannon Wright's hand, whereas Shannon can really dictate the strategy terms at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Shannon at this point can pit either way here. He could go longer or come in earlier.
Here we go. Second time he's tried this attempt. Dane shuts the door.
I do wonder, though, being on the softer tyre, I wonder if that restricts what Shannon Wright can do strategy-wise, and maybe he can't come in earlier. Otherwise, at the end of the race, he'll have no tyre left. So he may just have to come in on that 15 as they come up to John Wright here. And it's
this is awkward. Oh, no, this is going to be really awkward. Oh, John did as well as he could, I think, there to get out of the way.
Yeah, I think that went as well as we could have expected there. That was Wright got out of the way and thankfully didn't balk these guys. But Wright is as close as he's ever been so far.
Oh, there's contact! There's contact! And Shannon Wright's trying to stop to redress this as well. No, and there's further contact!
Right.
No, the cardinal sin, reversing into another car. And not only that, Shannon Wright has been balked a little bit there by John Wright. So
Termo's right there. Termo's caught them with that.
That he has indeed. So that is a big free kick. And Terry Marwood's gained enormously out of this as well. He's now inside of 7.5 seconds on the race leader. That was out to over 20. It was coming down. Terry Marwood had actually set a PB on the previous lap as well. So,
and we got Nankervis off the road just before Skyline as well.
And who's coming around? Here comes Murrell. So Murrell will take this position back, having already stopped, I think, as well, Scott Murrell.
He's had to do a little bit of shortcut.
And Liccardo's had a moment. He's had a moment at the chase, and he's walloped the barrier. And if I was me, I'd be getting into the pits right now. But no, he's elected to go on and press on with the strategy.
Got Termo and Wright side by side into Murray's as well. So it's all kicked off here.
And Terry was eyeing off a move down the inside of Dane Liccardo as well at the last turn. But this battle now at the front is on. Look at this. Termo all over the back of Shannon Wright. Geez, how did this flip around in the last minute?
It has, race has been flipped on its head. Termo right
in the wheel tracks of Shannon Wright. And Licardo's also got to deal with Terry Marwood behind. I do wonder if Licardo's rear tyres now a bit overheated. They will be the medium tyres, so they shouldn't be too bad after half a lap or a lap or so. They'll cool down, but certainly not ideal. But he's got to refocus. And now Turmo, he's got no damage. Wright will have a little bit from that contact, I'd assume. And Turmo could be in the box seat now.
Yeah, the damage that I think that Shannon Wright's probably carrying is pretty innocuous. It didn't look like it was very much of a hit. Sort of just like a little love tap as they went through, but it was at the critical moment where Dane was on the change of direction.
Marwood go around the outside of the cutting on the exit. The Volvo just so much better under acceleration, able to just out-drive him around the outside of the cutting. So Marwood now up into third.
Fantastic move. Now, can Terry Marwood set his sights on the back of Shannon Wright and Turmo? Look at the margin. Margin now 4.3 seconds, so hasn't this really played Terry Marwood back into contention here, not just for a podium, but for the race win. Who would have thought this after he'd been unceremoniously spun at the start of this race, and he has been given a gift here, Lewis.
Yeah. Over 20 seconds off, about 20 seconds off the race lead 2 laps ago, and now he's only 4.5 seconds away, and the guy in the lead is coming under a bit of pressure as well. So now, you know, maybe he might decide to maybe come in a little bit early, avoid battling with Licardo, who will give him a hard time here, and just get in that clear air and try and set some quick laps. As Licardo up the inside, I don't know if there's contact, but they're both off at the chase.
Oh, wow.
But neither of them wanted to give an inch. I'll have to have a look at that one post-race, but Marwood continues on, and in the end, he's only lost about 4 seconds. Licardo's lost more, and Licardo now into the pit lane.
Yeah, unsurprisingly after that one, get rid of those tyres and just get back out there and refocus on some good rubber. So Marwood continues on. So we didn't quite see that one. We were having a bit of a look at the Turmo and Shannon Wright battle, but that one maybe looked like it was brewing for a while. Maybe Dane tried to just sort of return the favour coming into the chase with the better top end speed, and both of them probably not wanting to give an inch. So definitely one for review post-race. Now, with Licardo stopping, the 3 cars in front of him yet to stop, Turmo, Shannon Wright, Terry Marwood. Scott Murrell has indeed stopped. And where is Licardo in all of this? He's going to get out just ahead, not by much, on Scott Murrell.
Yeah, so that's a visual representation of just how much time he's lost with that calamity of a lap just 2 laps ago, and then further contact on that last lap. So hopefully now Licardo can put it all behind him and just focus on putting some nice laps together, because, you know, with a little bit of luck, he can still win this race. He can certainly get a podium, but he's got to put it all together now.
Yep, definitely got to put it all together now. He's just got to put some nice consistent times in. He's got plenty of clear track ahead of him to the tune of about 38 seconds or so. And of course the drivers ahead of him all have to stop. And we got word that Higginson's retired, so that's a non-finish for Nathan Higginson. Unsighted, he must have had a few dramas. And actually is the second retirement, because Brennan Ross in the pits and actually in the live chat having some, our suspicion is confirmed, some gremlins with the steering wheel in his sim rig. So he's called it a day after a couple of laps. So those gentlemen unfortunately do not accrue points, having not met the minimum distance required.
Ricardo now on his outlet. Looks like he is just edging away a little bit from Murrell here. Got our leader, Shannon Wright.
Yep, he's in the pits. And Turmo too. And Marwood continues on.
Yep, so important now. Ricardo, this next lap and a half will set up the remainder of his race. If he can put together some quick times, he may be able to jump out in front of Marwood when he goes to pit, whenever he decides to pit. But he will come out behind Turmo and Wright, but he'll be hoping that those guys have maybe issue with their pit stops or with their tyres on their outlap and can claw back some of that time. So they're just moving in their boxes now. Liccardo is only now getting to the final corner.
So that is still a huge deficit that Liccardo has to chase down. He's going to have only one lap older tyres, so not very much difference compared to the drivers ahead. But he is got them up to temperature. Now he can only just see Termo going over the crest, so not that bad for him. Now Higginson has returned, so he must have had a game crash of some nature, so he'll get back out there and set some more laps. There he goes. And he's now 2 laps down to the race leader. So he didn't lose too much out of that. Only lost 1 lap. He was already 1 lap down. And he's only lost 1 additional lap. So he'll still be able to get out there, earn some points.
It's vital for him that he continues on out there. He won't want to lose. He's going to lose a heap of points already, being so far down compared to Shannon Wright for the championship. But as long as he keeps going out there, he'll still pick up some points. And we have seen in real life in supercars in other series that in the end, if you just send the car out there, it can win you a championship. So I've seen drivers win it and lose it by not being able to get their cars out, or by getting their cars out there. So he's going to try and pick up those points. Have been having a look at the gap between Liccardo and Marwood. He has just edged a little bit closer to Marwood here on this last lap and a half here, about half a second or so. So he is closing in. He probably needs to find another half a second or a second though.
Terry's coming in. Terry's coming in. So this is race leader in. So this now cleanses the field. Everybody has stopped at least once now. So we'll now get a clear indication of what the running order is going to be and where Dane Liccardo feeds back into this with regards to Terry Marwood's stop. So Wright will comfortably go through. Termo should comfortably go through to second place. There he is over the rise, coming down into Murray's. And where is the number 10 of Marwood? There he is, still in the pits. You can just see the roof there. There goes his teammate Shannon Wright, front of shot.
This is going to be tight here.
There's Terry. Yep, he's on the move.
It's got going. Liccardo's coming out of the final corner.
Yeah, Terry should hold this, and it will be pretty close, though. There'll be a couple of seconds margin, I think. There's the Commodore. So it's about the same sort of margin that Liccardo enjoyed over Murrell when they first came out of the pits. But Liccardo's got a head of steam here. Terry Marwood's got to get those tyres up to temperature and up to pressure, but he's well enough clear that he can stay in front. So, game on.
Yeah, so that gap at turn 2, at 1.6 seconds. So he gave it a fair shake, did Liccardo, did what he had to do, but the gap was just a little bit too much. Now it's all about these next 2 laps getting closer and closer and latching on to the back of Marwood. And it might be smart from him, Stephen, just to stick with Marwood for now, because I do expect these guys to both be faster than Termo in this final stint. So if Liccardo just buys his time, use Termo as a pick, he might be able to get both of them if they catch on to the back of Termo.
I second that emotion, Lewis. It would be very smart for Dane just to do the same thing that he did to Shannon Wright in the early couple of laps. Just stay within striking distance. If it forces an issue with Terry in front, then all well and good. If it doesn't, well, he's going to drag you up to that battle pack at the front anyway, or at the very minimum, going to drag you up to Termo. And as you said, if Terry goes through, creates a bit of a wedge, that's the opportunity that Dane needs then to slide through and grab what would then be third place. Good to see as well that he took your advice just a few seconds ago and tidied up his line through the elbow, realising that he needed to just stay a little bit further right, so carried a little bit less speed through the kink, the right-hander, and then set himself up nicely.
Dividends.
Yeah, it paid huge dividends.
Just the gap between himself and Marwood, it's a lot closer than what it would have been had he taken that other line, and now he's right there. Marwood, a little bit of a lock-up. And Marwood was good over the top. Liccardo made a slight mistake coming down the S's, and I thought for a second he might end up in the fence in that right-hander with where the I think the clean wave or that blue wall there. But he's done well. Has Liccardo's closed that gap down again. I think if he just plays the long game,
19.
they'll close up to the back of Turmo.
19.8 for Liccardo that time around. He did a 2:20.1 on the previous lap that Terry came in for his stop. So this is good times from Dane Liccardo at the minute. Turmo's responding though. Turmo's done a personal best lap time last time out, 2:20.3. So too Nathan Higginson, 2 laps down, but he will have pretty much fresh rubber on board with a 2:21.2. But Turmo's starting to realise the urgency here. Turmo was only a hair faster, 0.03 of a second faster than Shannon Wright last time around as well. These two guys behind were definitely quicker. Liccardo was anyway. Terry Marwood's 2:54 as an out lap. We won't really get a representative lap time until this time around. The conditions, Lewis, they're starting to change. We're starting to get closer to this sunset and dust sort of conditions. So the track's going to get darker from now. The temperature of the track is probably going to go down a little bit as well. So conditions might start to become a little bit tricky. Terry very wide at McPhillamy Park. Managed to gather it up though.
Yeah, didn't knew he'd made a mistake and didn't want to overcommit and make it a minor mistake into a major mistake. But problem for him now, Liccardo's at a second. He's only a second behind him, but he's taken that older line of his on this time, but he can't quite get on the power as early, and that will buy Marwood just enough time, I'd imagine. But track is getting darker. Drivers will be starting to turn on their lights. Some already have already.
Yep.
I do wonder. I'm not sure how it works in AC and with Sol if the conditions will get cooler, but that may be something to look out for with the drivers on soft tyres. Maybe they'll come a little bit more into their element with the drivers on the medium tyre. Maybe their tyres will just fall out of temperature and pressure range if it does cool down. So that may be something to look out for. But Liccardo starting to apply the blowtorch.
Well, let's have a look at what these guys' times are as we get across the line. Shannon Wright was a 2:20.3. Turmo was a 2:21.4. These guys are about to cross the line now. What do they register? 20.2 for Terry, 19.8 for Dane Liccardo. So back-to-back 19s. And believe it or not, those 2 laps are not that far off Liccardo's best lap of the race, which is the fastest lap of the race still at a 2:19.7. One thing I do want to find out though, Lewis, is you're talking about things like how things work in the Assetto Corsa. I want to find out if you know what happens when you lose a wheel, because we're getting some word through that that's what's happened to John Wright. And speaking of losing things, Terry Marwood might lose 3rd place here. Oh no!
I thought for a second there was going to be contact, but Liccardo just slammed on the brake heavy enough to avoid the contact. He's not going to have a look at the cutting. Does the smart thing there. He's driving Greg Murphy's car, or liveried car there, but doesn't do the Murphy thing and just put his nose in where it doesn't belong. So he's playing the long game. They are closing in on Turmo, who on that last lap was 1.2 seconds slower than Marwood. So Liccardo doing the job. Marwood also doing a great job holding on. I'm not too sure about losing a wheel. I can't say I've ever seen a car in AC lose a wheel with damage, so I'm not too sure about that one.
Yeah, well, you mentioned in the chat that he'd lost a wheel, so I'm assuming he was back in the pits getting that repaired, and he's back out there on track now because he was behind Liccardo and Marwood on track for a little bit, and now he's just giving up track position there to Scott Murrell, who's already a lap ahead of him. He's gone 2 laps down as John Wright. Now he's 2 laps down. Higginson is 2 laps down as well, and actually not that far behind him either. So talking about important points, and every point counts for Nathan Higginson at the moment in his championship battle. Coming into tonight, 18 points in arrears of Shannon Wright, and if it stands the way that it is right now, he would be set to go from 18 to 78 points in arrears. So a huge loss on the championship point standings if Higginson can't find maybe one and hope for a bit of luck when it comes to spots to pick up.
Yeah, Higginson's going to hope for a little bit of luck. We've actually got Willis in the pits as well, so Walsh now moves up into 7th place. He'll be hoping for a DNF or some issues. We see Liccardo up the inside at turn 1. Again, I think he's just getting a bit impatient here now. You had a look at the chase. Even though he was nowhere near the back of Marwood, maybe he was just trying to sight his points.
but I think he was just having a look. He would have been better served at the chase to just trying to save, get to the proper turn-in point to the outside and set up a run maybe for the final corner or for later on into turn 2. He's just getting to get a little bit impatient. There's still 12 laps to go, and they are closing in on Turmo. Again, they were a second a lap faster on that last lap, as he's wide and he's saved it just. And Marwood himself was also a little bit wide. He outbroke himself, maybe just looking a little bit in his mirrors there instead of paying attention to where they were going. But these guys right on the limit.
Yeah, Dick Liccardo went right out sideways in sympathy. I think that time around he was right in the wheel tracks of Marwood and just basically did exactly the same thing. And you were spot on too, Lewis. They were a full second faster to the 10th than Turmo the last time around. The one thing that they didn't account for, though, Shannon Wright turned himself a personal best on the previous lap, finally dipping into the 2-minute 19s, a 19.8. So same sort of lap time that Liccardo did about a lap or so ago, and about a tenth slower than the current race best lap.
Yeah, so these two guys, they're racing hard at the moment. They are making just little micro mistakes that, might not go off the road, but they just throw you off the line, and they do, in the end, they do bite. That you will lose a tenth or two, maybe even 3, 4, or 5 tenths of a second. So the fact that they're not losing that much time in comparison to Shannon Wright is actually quite a testament to how fast these guys are going. But I do wonder, as again, Liccardo looking at the inside of the chase.
Oh, and he's bowled it.
Going to make that work.
No, he's bowled it. He'll get a track cut for that as well. So he'll be given probably a slowdown.
Oh, and it's dangerous keeping your foot on the throttle when you rejoin the circuit. So again, maybe he's just out braking himself there, and he's realizing I've got to send it up the inside or run up the back of Marwood, who himself dips into the 19s. Liccardo would have been even faster. Had he not made that mistake. But again, he's just over driving it. Just needs to sort himself out just a little bit, because he's doing all the right things up until a certain point where he's making errors which he might not think he's making, but they are costing him, because if he hadn't have made these minor line adjustments or outbraking himself by a little bit, he'd probably be in front of Marwood at this stage. If not, it certainly have forced Marwood into a mistake.
Agree 100%. He needed to be doing the same things he was doing to Shannon Wright earlier on, where he forced a mistake on Shannon and was able to make a pass and make it stick. Turmo again responded last time around, lifted his pace a little bit relative to the lap before, but Terry Marwood, as you just mentioned, dipped under the 220s, a 219.8. So those two Volvos of Shannon Wright and Terry Marwood just starting to come into the fore as the conditions start to change. Maybe you're right, Lewis. Maybe the track conditions are paying a few dividends for them as the light fades and the track temperature starts to come down a little bit. And I don't know what Turmo's got in store, but we're on lap 19, and he has got, he's going to have rather, quite an angry Terry Marwood to contend with in the next, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 laps is where it's going to be.
Yeah, so he'll want to set out some quick lap times now. If he can, instead of hemorrhaging, say, a second a lap, if he can get that down to half a second a lap, Marwood would only catch him by pretty much the second last or the last lap of the race. So if he can just find that little bit of extra time now, he'll make things a lot easier for him in the long run. If he continues to hemorrhage about a second a lap, Marwood's only going to be there, as you said, in 3 or 4, maybe 5 laps time, and that's going to buy time for Marwood to set up a move at some stage. So Marwood would want to close in as quickly as possible and get himself back up into second. Turmo, he'll want to prolong that period of when Marwood does eventually catch the back of his car.
Wright and Turmo literally set the same lap time that time around. Just Shannon Wright was 0.02 of a second faster, so it was pretty much an as you were, gentlemen, last time around for them. Terry Marwood 219.775 PB, so he rips another 0.9 of a second out of this advantage of Turmo, and only fractionally again slower than Dane Liccardo's 219.736, which is the fastest lap of the race still. Liccardo a 220.498, so couldn't go with Terry that time around, but I guess for Terry, now that he's not being harassed by the VL Commodore, he's free to really start to pile on the pressure on Termo and sort of say, well, I'm going to close this margin down. What have you got to respond with?
Yeah, so clearly Marwood's car starting to come into its own now. I do wonder if he started with a full tank of fuel in this race and only just added that that half lap that he needed. So now he'd be, fairly low on fuel, on the soft tyre, as the conditions start to darken up a little bit, which will aid it. As just looking at Ricardo, he's getting a little bit ragged at the moment. And Termo himself, he hasn't been setting too bad a lap time. So we've got Ricardo around at the top. He's ran wide at Philimy on the curb.
Clouded the fence as well.
Spun it around, so I did say he was getting ragged.
Yep.
And he's just started to overdrive it. I think he's just getting worried that Marwood was starting to drive away from him, and he needed to pick up the pace. Sometimes, again, you just got to think long game. Marwood still has to catch the back of Termo and pass him, and there's an opportunity there to close that gap back up.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Lewis. The overdriving, I think he was just getting a little bit too eager to get back to Terry's rear bumper. He was sort of kind of having to hope, I think, that maybe Termo could hold Terry up for a little bit longer, because both of them were still gaining on Termo in terms of lap time. And now Ricardo's just got to settle down for a little bit. Those rear tyres will have been overheated by having to flick spin the car. He's going to have to get them back under control and then try and find his groove again. But all hope of a podium finish for this one, I think, may have just gone out the window.
Yeah, he's going to need a mistake or some kind of drama for one of the front three runners. Marwood on that lap,
full second.
Not as quick as what he has been of late. 1.2 seconds slower than his previous lap. I don't know if he made a mistake or had a little bit of traffic. I think there's Brian Walsh there in the background that would have maybe held him up there. But again, as you said, a second faster than Termo, who for the most part has been quite consistent. But he lost quite a bit of time there. So maybe Termo as well lost a little bit of time with that bit of traffic.
Well, let's take stock of the rest of the field while Terry Marwood starts to close down on Termo. Of course, Shannon Wright still in the lead. Termo, Marwood, so it's a Volvo 1, 2, 3 at the moment. Ricardo we saw have a bit of a spin just a few minutes ago. Scotty Murrell's having a bit of a lonely race at the moment. P5, we did say he was a bit of a smoky for a podium. Not in contention at the moment. Has had a couple of issues of his own. And very much, what's he there, about 40 seconds away from fourth place man Ricardo, but he is also 40 seconds the opposite direction to Jamie Nankervis in the 018, and this guy's had a bit of a quiet night again as well, but it's good points for him. Brian Walsh, first of the runners, one lap down, and had a spirited battle very early on with Brian Munn, and had Brett Willis to contend with as well, and Willis was ahead of Walsh and has now dropped behind him. So the number 20 soldiers on. Brian Munn is the last of the runners, one lap down. And then Higginson and John Wright, with Higginson now having passed John Wright. So that position has changed. And then, of course, John Wright's been in for another pit stop to repair that lost wheel, or rather replace that lost wheel.
Yeah, so just having a look at the moment. Marwood has closed that gap down. He is right behind Termo. So Termo, he's got 8 laps of hell coming up unless Marwood makes mincemeat of him and just gets by him pretty quickly here. But straight up the inside at the final corner, Termo gives him space and, one shot and straight up into second place for Terry Marwood.
Yep, had one job to do, Termo, and that was just to defend for a little bit longer and just made it easy for him at the end. I was actually surprised that Termo was here tonight. I did hear him in the Discord channel last night saying that he was looking to race another series tonight potentially, but maybe has decided he would rather have a crack at Bathurst, given it's the one that everybody wants to win, and glad he decided to do that now because he's in third place. And I think maybe he gets the sense that Terry was definitely going to overhaul him in the end, so why not bother to make it difficult. Third place is still nothing to be frowned upon, and it's a good haul of points for him. And as it stands right now, with Dylan Call not being here tonight, that would leapfrog him into 8th place. So thinking about the longer term plan, which is where you finish on the points table come the end of the season.
Yeah, so Termo hasn't done the full season. He's only done, I think, 2 or 3 rounds prior to this one. So he has been quick and consistent when he has raced. It's good to see him here tonight. I do believe he was scheduled to run a NASCAR race. I can't remember what sim it was in. Maybe even been Assetto Corsa itself. But yeah, he was scheduled to race a NASCAR race, but due to there not being enough drivers, he come and raced here instead. And I think he'll be quite glad that not all those drivers showed up, because he's driven a nice clean race. He's had some solid pace and finds himself now in a podium position with just over 7 laps remaining.
And he's got 20-second margin on 4th place Dane Liccardo as well, which is good for him. He doesn't need to do anything silly, and he hasn't really put a foot wrong all night, Termo. He's just been plodding along nice and solidly, and very, very clean race car at the moment. I actually can't see a mark on that car at all anywhere. So he's driving it very straight, very sensibly, doing the thing that we tell everybody to do, and that's just find your groove, stick to it, hit your markers, do everything right, just all the little 1%ers really well, and you'll come home at the end of the day with a straight race car.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example, really, of what you want to teach, inexperienced drivers, that, and especially at such a difficult racetrack as what Bathurst is, because if you can race at 100% the whole time, but when you do that, you are going to make a mistake, and at a track like this, that generally means significant damage. But what Termo has done, he's dialed it back. Instead of driving it perhaps 100% the whole time, he's found a pace that he's comfortable with, and he's able to lap at that pace, if he's not battling anyone or have lap traffic, pretty much every single lap. So he's happy and comfortable with that pace. He's not going to make a mistake driving that way, and he finds himself now rewarded with what should be a comfortable 3rd place.
Yeah, spot on there. And the gap to Liccardo is pretty much staying stationary and stable. Liccardo's actually dropped into the 223s the last time around, so even he thinks that the gig is probably up, and that 4th is going to be the best that he finishes from now on. He's got a bit of lap traffic with Brian Walsh just ahead in the Ford Falcon. So once he negotiates Brian, I think it'll just be a simple case of just keeping his nose clean till start. Oh, and that was a little bit awkward.
It's awkward, but they got through it with no contact, thankfully. I think the lap traffic tonight seems actually been quite good. He had John Wright was in front of Dane Liccardo and Shannon Wright for a little while, and he just got out of the way just in time, just a little bit earlier on the lap at McPhillamy. So lap traffic's been quite good from what we've seen so far, which is good to see, because we've both seen races where lap traffic has gotten in the way at awkward points of the racetrack and altered the outcome of the race.
Yeah, we've seen that quite often in numerous series over the years where lap traffic becomes a problem, but most of the drivers all pretty much sitting in the same Discord together, except for Brendan Ross, Nathan Higginson and Dane Liccardo. They've all gone off on their own just to have a little bit of quiet, I think. And the drivers all can communicate with each other and at least let them know that they're coming up to each other. And Brian Walsh was just a little bit out of control there. I think he very nearly put 2 wheels in the grass on the outside of the chase through the right hand up, and was very lucky to stay on the track there. And he's plodding along solidly.
And it is getting a little bit dark, and I wonder if maybe Brian probably did see him coming, but maybe if Dane had his lights on, Brian may have seen him earlier and gotten out of the way a little bit earlier as well, but it didn't seem to affect him too much lap time wise. He was still a second faster than Termo on that last lap.
Having got the session timer, we are about to tick over 56 minutes of race time. The race leader currently on lap 24 and at the top of the mountain, so another 6 laps to go after this one. By the time he gets to the bottom, there is 56 minutes. Oh, who's that doing? That's Brian Munn with some wheels in the dirt at McPhillamy. So by the time Shannon Wright gets to the bottom of the mountain, we'll probably be at about 57 minutes with 6 laps or so to go. It'll probably take us up to around about 68, 70 minutes for this race. So pretty close to the estimate we had at the start of the night. It's a long time to be in the sim seat, Lewis, especially around a track like this.
Yeah,
in cars like this, more importantly.
Yeah, unless you're comfortable with that your tyre life and your setup, it is a long time. Having recently driven this version of the track, albeit in a different sim, for the Automobilista Supercar Championship 1000, I was only in the car for almost 2 stints, but that, at least the first stint, which was pretty much all green, I believe. I mean, it's comparable. So it's 24 laps. It felt like a lifetime. So these guys still have another 6 laps to go in cars which are about 13 to 14 seconds a lap slower. I guess the only reprieve for these guys is that across the top of the mountain you're not going as fast, so you don't you're not holding your breath for as much, and they're not as fast down the straight, so you can got that little bit of extra time to breathe. But it is a long time in the sim, and I do expect there to be some drivers out there that have dropped a little bit of lap time wise, not because of damage to their cars or because of tyre wear. It'll simply be because they're tired. They might not have a fan on, or they don't have air conditioning and they're a bit warm, as well as they'd be a little bit mentally. They might not feel fatigued, but that focus and edge that you'd have at the start of the race or on a qualifying lap just isn't there anymore.
Absolutely. Shannon Wright still continuing on. We're watching Brett Willis at the moment. Again, another one of the drivers that's had a few misfortunes, and also another one of the drivers that has changed cars this season as well, having gone from the Skyline at the very beginning of the year, which was the race that afterwards, I believe he actually went in for some surgery, and we didn't see him again until the Gold Coast, by which time he was in this car. Obviously having had a chat to the likes of Shannon and Terry and said, you know what, this car is the car to be in, get yourself in it, and he's done exactly that.
Yeah, quite handy, the old Volvo from what we've seen, running 1, 2 and 3 here, and obviously Nankervis there in P6 as well. I think Willis as well is in 8, so quite a handy car. Good all-rounder from all the things that we've seen and heard. I think he'll certainly be glad that he's jumped into the Volvo, which seems to be a fairly easy car to drive. We have seen some other cars like the VL be quite quick in places, Stephen, but it doesn't quite seem to have that, what would you call it? It can be fast, but it's rather edgy, or it has to be edgy to be fast, and I think that's what's caught out a number of these drivers that have driven, and I'm sure that may be the case for a couple of the other cars as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a car that you need to be able to have be one with, isn't it? I guess that's probably the right word for it, because of what you need to do to get the best out of the car. You need to have that little bit of an oversteery type setup, so it's sort of on a knife's edge, as you like to put it just then. And it's a balancing act. You've got to learn how to control the slide. You've got to learn how to bring the throttle on nicely. Otherwise, you just end up doing what Nathan Higginson does and just be sideways at every corner. But that's what Dane was doing for the better part of the first 20 laps. He was able to dial into it, and he's doing it again now, just knowing when to pick the throttle up at the right times. But the downside for him is he's down the 224 bracket, so it's probably just started to become a little bit much for him after that incident earlier at the top of the mountain, which pretty much threw away his third place attempt. And just on the notes of famous winners, actually having a look down there, the Holden VL Commodore has actually only won this race twice. It won the race the year after that the chase came in as we know it today, and that was in the hands of Peter Brock, David Parsons and Peter McLeod. That was back in 1987. And then the last time that it won was all the way back in 1990, which was Win Percy and Alan Grice. Now that's the livery that's on the Brian Munn car, who's having a bit of a moment now, going off course up Mountain Straight. That was a bit weird there. That was not the spot where I'm expecting somebody to go off like that.
No, not
I think he's
normally
having some control issues, I think, here, because he's all over the shop.
Yeah, so something's going on there. But just going back to the VL, I do believe the win in '87 with Brock, was that his last win at Bathurst? I think.
Having a look down, I believe you might be right. If I go all the way down, and yes, it is.
I do believe that was also the year. I think that was the year that the Texaco Sierras got disqualified for illegal fuel. I think, and if it is right, the car that won the race didn't actually complete 161 laps. It was 3 or 4 laps down in that race. So there's a bit of trivia. The car that won the race was 4 laps down, or 3 laps down, or whatever it was.
Yeah, just digging into this now, it actually says, the Holden VL was 100. It completed 158 laps in 7 hours and 1 minute. And if I dive into the records, you're right. There's the Eggenberger Motorsport Sierras. And you're spot on, that was the one where they were disqualified for illegal fuel, handing the victory to that particular VL Commodore. And if I go down the order here, I'm just looking to see where the DSQ, Ford Texaco Racing Team, Steve Soper and Pierre Duduni, and Klaus Ludwig and Klaus Niederwitz.
So some big touring car names of the time, and the Sierra being a bit of a beast at the time, but for whatever reason they thought, we'll chuck some illegal fuel in this thing and make sure we come home and win the race. They won the race, but got themselves disqualified. I
think that's actually the only one. I'm looking at all the history here of the what was for a long time the Tui's 1000, the AMP Bathurst 1000, the James Hardy 1000, the Hardy Ferraro 1000, so it's all sorts of its names over the years. That's the only race that actually the race winner did not complete the full 161 laps.
So that has to be the only... Well, I don't know if there's been any other disqualifications, but obviously in this case, the only cars that... I think it was the Sierras that were 1 and 2, I think. And obviously they were well out in front, so quite an odd one. There wouldn't be too many races, let alone such a big and historic race as what the Bathurst 1000 is, where the car that has eventually won the race has actually been multiple laps down. I think there'd only be maybe a handful of races around the world that's ever ended in that fashion.
I would almost think there'd be less than half a dozen. That's how rare I think an event like that probably is. And to give you an indication, that was the very first years we said that the chase came in. Before that, the race was 163 laps with the chase gone. So it just goes to show that adding that little section of racetrack in caused the race to be shortened from, or was actually 2 laps longer. So that means it was an extra 12.4 kilometres of racetrack over the course of 160 odd laps that changed as a result of a chase going in. That's an incredible amount of distance, considering how much alteration had to be done there. It's not a huge amount of extra tarmac that got laid down, but it had a huge impact over the course of a 1,000-kilometre race.
Yeah, that's it. It's 2 laps is very, very significant at a track like this, and as you said, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's all that much compared to how the track used to be. I know I'm old enough to remember a number of circuits that have gone through just even minor changes to them. Like one, for example, is the Montreal Grand Prix circuit in the late 90s, early 2000s, that used to be 69 laps, but all they did was shorten the length from the second last chicane, so pretty much where Robert Kubica had his accident. If you can think of that hairpin, they lengthened or shortened the straight to that hairpin by, I think, maybe 200 meters or so, and that increased the distance of the race by a single lap, and it didn't really alter the lap times all that much, or was a significant change. But
Bathurst, I mean, it doesn't seem like it changed all that much yet. It was 2 laps, so it's quite odd sometimes how it works itself out.
Yeah, the one that Brendan Ross just asked about in the live chat was 2016, where Whincup was leading but had the time penalty over his head. I mean, that was applied as a post-race penalty. There's a 15-second post-race penalty, just looking up here, which was the win that went to Will Davison and John O'Webb in the Styx Techno Autosports Commodore on that particular day. So I don't think that one, I guess, is that one's another one of those sort of exceptions where the race leaders crossed the line and had a penalty handed out to them post-race, but that's a little bit different compared to not only disqualifications of the top 2 cars, but also the situation we were referring to with the race-winning car having not completed the full race distance but still being handed the race win.
Yeah, I think Whincup was only maybe at most 10 seconds in front of Davison at the time, so it wasn't laps in front like the case it was for Brock in his final win. So yeah, quite a bit different. I do feel though with that 2016 race that Whincup was robbed of that, because funnily enough post race Scott McLaughlin got penalised for his rejoin, which he went off the track. He shouldn't have been hit off the road, but Whincup was just trying to redress, as we all know. A very famous moment in Bathurst. One of the ones in the recent years that will probably live on for quite a while. With once McLaughlin rejoined the road, Tander wanted to get by Whincup, and hilarity and comedy as well as carnage ensued, and a Mark Scaife orgasm, I think, at the same time.
I was about to say one of the very famous Scaifisms, as they like to call it, that everybody loves to hear now and everybody uses in just about every meme production that you can find when it comes to sim racing. So that's the one thing that did come out of that everybody loves to hear. I've actually just noticed too, Lewis, I'm just sort of starting to pick bits and pieces out as this race winds down, that the helicopter is still in the air, despite the fact that it is probably in about 7:30 odd at night, I think, game time. So they're obviously got a pretty good view from where they are up there.
Well, they'd get a good view of the headlights and the brake lights, but they wouldn't really get to see too much else out there, I'd imagine.
There's another car, there's another car, there's another car, because they wouldn't be able to tell what car's what at this particular stage of the race, I don't think.
Yeah, not unless they had a keen eye and they're able to tell which headlights is which, because they are slightly different. They wouldn't be able to tell who is who. Let's just have a look at the lap times, and Brian Munn on that last lap, on his penultimate lap, he's just set a personal best of a 2:22.9. So he's finally figured out how to drive the circuit. Unfortunately for him, it's much too late for it to alter the outcome of his race.
Yeah, you're spot on there, and it's good to see that at least somebody's actually been able to find their best lap time in the fading light of what is now the final lap for the race leader, which is good to see. Having a look at the fastest lap spread, of course, Dane Liccardo's fastest lap is probably going to stand unless Shannon Wright can bust it open in this last lap, but I think he'd probably just be keen to bring it home. So a 2:19.7 is the fastest lap, more specifically a 2:19.736. The slowest lap of the race so far is John Wright's 2:29.1, but I think he has had his fair share of troubles. And then the next one under that is Brian Walsh's 2:25.9. Considering Brian Walsh is in a Group C car as well, compared to all the other guys that are in Group A's, that's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's not bad, because he's in front of Brett Willis. We haven't seen too much of his race. Obviously, Higginson's had a bit of issues, but Brett Willis, I mean, his fastest lap is 2 seconds faster than Brian Walsh, but Brian Walsh finds himself in front of him on the road. So that's a really good effort from Walshy. His last lap wasn't too flash at a 31.0, but he's only got one more lap to traverse. So he's done a really good job there in the old big banger there, the Group C car. And I don't think we'll see a fastest lap from either of the front two runners, because the last few laps have been, just plodding around in the 21s and 22s. So if it does happen, it'll be out of nowhere. But those two
Bright and Marwood just cruising to the finish line.
Yeah, you can just see Terry Marwood in the back of shot as well. He's just started to close in on Shannon Wright, and Shannon's actually slowing here. I think we might get a formation finish here, or they're going to try and orchestrate a formation finish, I think. Here comes Terry, and it's going to be a Volvo all-wheels and a Gold Coast Lawn Bowls Racing Team 1-2. Famous finish, much the same as the very, very famous Ford formation finish in the early 70s.
Also got I think Team Vodafone in 2010 were able to do the same thing with Craig Lowndes and Jamie Whincup first and second as well. So famous finish for the Volvos on this occasion. Shannon Wright did a fabulous job with only the one blemish. He obviously ran into the back of Dane Liccardo there, but outside of that, did what he had to do, had the pace, had a little bit of luck as well with Marwood getting a poor start. But it has to be said though, Stephen, Terry Marwood has done a fantastic job to fight back to second place after being about 25 seconds, I think, at one point behind the race leaders.
He has done a brilliant job. Was given a free kick, obviously, with the incident that happened between Liccardo and Shannon Wright. Liccardo himself finishing fourth. Volvo 1, 2 and 3, so Wright, Marwood and Termo, the finish there. And, well, poor old Scotty Murrell has had probably the quietest of races I think you can possibly imagine. And he's going to come home for 5th place as it stands right now. Who's that kicking up a bit of dust ahead of him? That's Brett Willis, who's a lap down. And I think Scotty will just... is he going to follow him home here, or is he going to try and round him up before the flag?
Looks like he's having a crack.
They've both got headlights off, so this is bound to end in disaster if they can't see where each other is.
Oh, no, there you go.
There we go. Murrell's through.
Oh, he's a bit sideways under braking there. A bit of puff of smoke as well. And Volvo behind him as well. Just struggling a little bit there at the chase, but they're going to come home in... Murrell home in 5th place, with Willis going to come home in P8. It has been a pretty intriguing race. As,
Brett Willis just went off the road. I thought he was on his way to Bathurst Township for a minute there. Just went straight on at the final corner, albeit temporarily. J-turn from Murrell, and another one back the other way. And the last, also looking like he was going to Bathurst Township, was Jamie Nankervis.
Well, if they are going down there, if they could pick me up some KFC, that'd be great, because I've not eaten dinner yet. But I was just about to say, it's been a really intriguing race. Obviously, the last few laps weren't all that exciting, but the first 20 laps, Stephen, some of the best racing we've had in the series so far. Dane Liccardo really take it up to the Volvos. Couldn't quite get the job done. Obviously, once he got the tap from behind from Shannon Wright, his race did sort of fall apart from there. But got to say, probably his best 19 to 20 laps that he's driven in a race. Unfortunately, it fell apart after that. Shannon Wright, nice and consistent and always. And then we had Termo just doing Termo things, nice and consistent, coming home in a well-deserved 3rd place. In Marwood, a fantastic fight back after a disastrous start where he started from pole, but pretty sure he was last by the end of turn 1.
Yeah, you're right. He was last by the end of, pretty much close to last by the end of turn 1. He had a real fight on his hands. He was 25 seconds down, or more than 25 seconds down, at the beginning of the elbow and the beginning of Conrod Straight. He had it all to do, and somehow or another he managed to just very quietly just chip away a little bit of time and a little bit of time and a little bit of time. And then the big chunk of time came when there was the incident on the run to the elbow between Shannon Wright and Dane Liccardo, and he gained enormously out of that one. He was the biggest benefactor out of that. That pretty much set up his run to the podium.
Yeah, and again, I did talk about during the race that, Termo was a bit of a model there of what to do, just plugging away and driving at your speed. But another, crucial lesson for a lot of drivers is just not giving up. Marwood didn't give up. He worked his way through the field, didn't make mistakes after, what happened at the start, and he obviously had pace because he put it on a pole and was very close to the fastest lap of the race, and comes home very well deserved 2nd place.
Yeah, spot on. Now, in terms of championship implications for that as well, that's really good for Terry Moa because it actually has vaulted him back ahead of Dane Liccardo by 4 points. So that third place going begging for Dane Liccardo has cost him third place overall in the standings. He would have been 6 points ahead had that have not gone to Termo and had it gone to him. So that is now a really interesting fight that we need to look forward to in a week's time when we have the second of the night races. And if we bring up the calendar so you can see what that looks like, that is the Singapore Grand Prix circuit and then followed by Bahrain to finish out the end of November. So 2 circuits these cars would not have ever seen before. And if night racing tonight is anything like what we saw, bring on the next 2 weeks.
They're going to be very, very intriguing rounds because I know people are going to think, okay, the Volvo's going to have an advantage. Singapore's a twisty circuit. It's a twisty circuit for Formula One cars. The cars these are the touring cars. They're massive circuits. Bahrain has some very, very long straights. It has some twisty bits and some hairpins, but top speed is going to be a factor. Even at Singapore, where you've got that long run after, I'm trying to imagine, you got turn 1, I think after turn 4, you've got a long run through turn 5 and then the braking zone for turn 6. You've also got the bit going over the bridge as well, and then down the pits as well. So if the VLs can just, keep it nice and smooth out of corners, it's going to put the other cars, the Volvos and stuff under pressure. And again, at Bahrain, there's a heap of straights where, top speed is going to be, important. So it's going to be an interesting next few rounds for the drivers in this series.
Yeah, it certainly will be. And, well, speaking of interesting, the top 3 are slowly starting to make their way to pay us a little visit. I'm hoping we might get a chance to have a chat to Terry Marwood because we haven't had a chance to speak to him all season long, despite the fact he's finished on the podium. Shannon Wright's here. He might be able to confirm whether or not Terry's going to come and visit us. But otherwise, Shannon, pretty much a very interesting race from your perspective probably as well, having to get your elbows out with Dane Liccardo for the better part of the first half of that race.
Yes, mate. I'll tell you what, I need a cool suit next time we do something like this. I can't imagine like 161 with the supercars around here. But mate, yeah, first off, Terry won't jump in. He's not that type of person to get on here and talk on that, but I'm sure he'd be definitely on here with a few words and say he enjoyed the race. And it was, as above all, between me and Dane, I had to done a bit of practice and everything like that, worked on race pace and what I was going to do, and that went out the window after the first 2 laps, and it's like, okay, right, let's just see what we can do. Once he got past, I realised where he was strong and where I was strong, and then once I started overheating the tyres, I thought back off, and I started to follow him, and once I started following, my life came back, and I was able to fight harder. And then it was just a matter of just trying to make the position, but obviously you can see we just tagged each other. He came across to cover his line, which is what he can do. I was obviously coming down a bit of speed and tagged him. I sat there, waited for him, and then John collected him. So, but it was, a bit of a shame, but it was some good racing.
Yeah, it definitely was, and that was all set up by Dane's very, very impressive start. We remarked that he was probably going to if he could get a good start, he'd be right up there. And from our perspective, he sort of did all the right things for most of that race. He managed to get away from you or beat you to the accelerator when it got to Conrod, so he was able to open up a gap. But he defended really well and had his elbows out quite a lot. Sometimes there was not a lot between you guys going over the top of the mountain, but he just was able to put his car in the right position at the right times, just to keep you at bay for just that little bit. And it was just sort of after that incident you mentioned at the elbow that it all started to go the wrong way for him, didn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Once I seen him actually using the brakes in the corners, like up over the top where I was pretty well off the brakes and using the throttle, I thought, okay, he's going defensive here. So I thought, okay, I'll just hold the pressure on it. And yeah, obviously the move was going to be done, but wasn't going to be done by tagging him.
No, certainly not. And it's just one of those things, I guess, that it'll obviously be looked at after the race. But passes, I guess, sometimes are opportunistic. Sometimes they're planned well in advance. But I guess you can't plan for the unplanned, can you?
No, mate, and I was nowhere going to get him on the straight, so it all had to be in the corners or up over the top.
Well, you got another win in the bag, mate. You keep racking these ones up, and you're starting to march away with this championship. We'll see you in a week's time for Singapore.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the broadcast.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks to everyone that raced tonight, and thanks to all the guys that were getting lapped and move out of the way. It was great advocacy from everyone.
Yeah, we second that from here as well. We did see everybody sort of getting out of the way most of the time in a pretty timely manner. Lewis, what about our third place man who's here? Now, he's also not much of a talker. Last time he was a little bit crook, but geez, he kept his nose clean for this entire race, didn't he?
He's the most talkative person I know, so that is a lie, Stephen. Termo, a man of many words, so I do expect quite a few words after what was a very, very solid drive. Termo didn't quite have the outright speed of some of the drivers in front of you, but you found a bit of time in qualifying, and then come the race, as the race wore on, you found yourself in an increasingly better position through some very solid consistency.
Yes.
He's not going to do you the pleasure here, Lewis. He's not going to do you the pleasure. I knew that as soon as you started going on with a bit of it, you got to keep it nice and short and sweet with this man.
Yeah, perhaps I do, but maybe one day we'll get more words out of him. But Termo, do you feel that you've made any setup changes in qualifying that help you find a little bit of extra time? Because in practice you were doing okay, but you certainly seemed to take it up a notch come qualifying.
I was running a setup from last week and realised it was not doing anything. So I went back to default and somehow found time.
Well, that'll do it. And then towards the back end of the race, you did have Terry Marwood closing you down at a rate of knots. Did you consider battling harder, or were you just happy to come home and take a solid third place?
I was happy to take a solid third. I didn't want to argue.
Well, still, a great effort tonight, Termo, and congratulations on third place, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you.
Well, what we might do is, I think, leave it there for tonight. It's been a long night for some of these drivers, and they've done very, very well, I think, to negotiate 30 laps straight in very, very difficult cars, Lewis. Thanks for joining me, as always, mate.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and once again, well done to Shannon Wright, Terry Marwood, as well as Termo, and I guess commiserations to Dane Liccardo on what was a very good race up until that off there at Forest Elbow.
Yeah, spot on. He'll be kicking himself, but he'll pick himself up and dust himself off. As always, guys, please drive safely. We'll see you in a week for round 9 from the Singapore Grand Prix circuit. Bye for now.